What have you guys been up to, man?
I had leg day today at the gym, and the guy made sure that I go back home with nothing left.
Leg days are crazy. I really need to get back to the gym.
Yeah. Jay-Z said, how do you skip leg day and you want to run the wall? If you want to
That's
run the
be a
wall, you like
joker. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's been busy, busy, busy. I've been trying to, I'm doing myth busting at work. So, I think we built V1 of the products based off some assumptions, and now I'm taking things to the next level, like product discovery, talking to suppliers, buyers, all the stuff. And it's interesting because then you realize that, oh, this thing was built with like very high intuition and this thing has to be scraped off. So it's like two extremes. And it's been very interesting. At least that's what's happening on my end.
So, like talking to like real life folks who actually buy your product at work.
Yep. So real life users, because a marketplace, you have both suppliers and buyers. So you're talking to them and trying to understand how most of them work offline. So how the offline experience even is like, and then what touch points you could use as an elevated user experience for them. And it's been very interesting. I'm always in awe of the platform. Each and every day I get surprised.
I don't know about you, but like in product, Jeremiah, like the popular advice is, hey, talk to your users, always talk to your users, And then with a few times I have actually spoken to folks who use it, the incentives are not aligned because like they work for the company and they're paid to do what they do. I mean, even if the product is crappy, they're going to use it anyways. So, but even that, like, you would prepare like a doc, you prepare like a doc, you have like all of your questions in there, context, like core questions, and then maybe supplementary questions, all of that type stuff. And then you go in there and you ask the first question and they're like, yes, Second question, no. So
I think
it's
it's
always
gruesome, and I like to set the tone, right? Because I think people feel they walk into the call and they are getting judged. I've had that vibe a couple of times. So the very first thing is setting the tone, telling you that, hey, you're king. Like whatever you're going to tell me is what's going to reflect on the platform, which really is not the case all the time. But then it comes down to breaking that bias because it feels like, okay, I need to stick to some script. There's always that feeling on the side of the user. And when that does not get broken in the first minutes, the entire conversation becomes scripted.
Yeah. I guess that's the difference between B2B versus B2C. B2C will always keep you on your toes, right? Because users,
Yeah.
sometimes the users with the least margins are the ones that have the biggest demands.
I think it's everywhere, right? And for me, I like to watch them do the stuff, like plugging in this whole Hotjar or whatever, Microsoft Clarity. Watching them do the stuff is way, way interesting because then when you combine it with like other sources of data, you go like, whoa, this is what you guys are doing. The observability bit trumps everything for me because then you see the real behavior. Because people can always tell you stuff, right? They'll always tell you stuff.
And I think the biggest analogy in that space for me is that someone once said, when you watch a user like use your product and they actually see you watching them, it's no different from driving with a cop behind you. You're always doing the right things. But when you watch them without them knowing that you're watching them, it's a lot more insightful.
Yep.
Yeah.
Facts. Facts. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
A cop holding a gun behind your head.
Also, somebody that I think I'll tell you about him a little more later. He said B2B is like a whole big Ponzi scheme. And actually, he said B2B SaaS is like a whole big Ponzi scheme. On the face value, it seems funny, but look at this, right? Like everybody has Slack, right? Then folks in Slack have Gmail or Microsoft. Then
I think recently someone actually tweeted something around that, right? I've forgotten the source of the tweet, but it was like startup idea, set up a startup, right? And I think you can raise money, but then you raise money by getting someone to use the product, and then you also use the other person's product. And it's like you're trading that entire thing and you're giving each other 1 billion R every year. And I thought it was quite fascinating. But then, of course, it's gonna crumble because you can't just keep rounding the same catch over and over again. But it was a very interesting analogy. I think it was a troll, actually.
Yeah. I mean, I guess MCP is going to kill all SaaS, right? I think when Satya Nadella first said it, I think it was a couple of months ago to say SaaS is dead and the AI agents would take over. And I think that didn't make a lot of sense unless you were in sort of the Microsoft ecosystem and you were using Copilot for everything in terms of getting data from all your different parts of the suite. And I think now what we're seeing is a glimpse into a future whereby are you really going to need your Gmail client at least, or are you going to need your SAP client? Are you going to need your Slack client if you could just do everything in real time with high latency on one sort of chatbot? I think we're far away from that, but I think what we're seeing is like the NFT moment for what that could be. I mean, I was definitely playing around with the Gmail MCP for Claude desktop, and it was interesting. Like, yo, what are my emails today? What should I be responding? Can you summarize them? Could you write back with this response? And it's still a bit early days, but it's interesting to see that you could just type out your life. And so at that point, it's like, do you really need the SaaS UI, or do you just need the database of your SaaS?
Yeah, I think that's where we're heading towards, right? Because then it now becomes the case of wherever your data is stored, people who own platforms will now have a lot of power and they'll be able to innovate around, this, whether it's like using AI agents or using a chat interface to get things done. But then at the end of the day, it comes down to where data is stored. Like if you are able to get a bit of utility on that, where people are be able to master the experience of getting the data inputs, seamlessly into your databases, and then master the use of the data in several other ways, then you're the one who make the bank. So user experience is really, coming up the radar as well, because that's like literally everything. It boils down to usability, even with the
But what's maybe question for you both is what's different with MCPs, right? Because if we take APIs and maybe I'm building a website and I need the weather for like a particular city, I have that in my website. I could use an API to go get the weather from maybe openweather.gov and put it in my website. What's different with MCPs or maybe agents? What's different in that world?
I think I mean, you're right. The underlying infrastructure is quite similar, right? It's just an API call that we're providing a standard for. And we've seen several standards before, including gRCP and GraphQL, all these things to try and make your applications easier to integrate or talk to each other. I think what makes this one interesting is the fact that the LLM or the agent has got memory. And right now, I think what's hot and what a lot of people are researching on is how to create long-term memory, because we have like short-term memory and semi-long-term memory, but I think, and even that is powerful enough. But once you get to long-term memory, then you literally have like a second brain who knows you, who knows every prompt that you've ever made, who knows your favorite color, who knows your, and so when you have that, keeping that memory in mind, and then having all the data sources, you literally, when you ask your GPT Gmail MCP to say, hey, what are my most important emails I should respond to? The word important is loaded, but with memory, it means that it understands what important means. It means that maybe you have previously went to an appointment that day, or you've got a few birthdays coming up. So there's so much more context to how you're accessing data. And if you think about that, that just makes, it just personalizes your ability to speak with these different services, because it's like, when you go into your budgeting platform using the same chat interface and you're saying, hey, I would like to cut down my expenses. Today, you can't say that because it doesn't have a context of what you're going through. But having memory, it will know that, oh, okay, your previous chat was maybe on Gmail and you just got laid off, right? And so when you come into your budgeting MCP and says, or your expenses MCP, and you say, hey, I'd like to cut down expenses, then it automatically is removing your salary from an income source. And so that understanding of like having context of who you are across different platforms will just make your life more efficient and also reduce the time to onboard onto those platforms.
Yeah. And it's
That's
scary,
huge.
because then, yeah, it's huge and scary at the same time. That's why I keep saying that cybersecurity as a domain is never gonna phase out, because the more barriers, get broken, the more systems, are connected to each other, the higher the chances of, security issues, and cybersecurity then becomes like a very interesting subject. Unfortunately, I find it to be too boring. So I'm not able to. I've been trying to develop some love for it, but then it never slaps. I've been trying, bro. I've been trying. It never works. So I'm giving up. But maybe it'll get necessary to probably delve into that. But yeah, it means security is also going to be hot.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's something
Yeah.
I've been thinking about. I think I'll probably be retiring into my own venture in 5 years' time. So let's
Early, re-
see.
early retirement.
Not early retire. When there are two types of retirement, like retiring from the workforce and then doing your own stuff, and then there's like the full FIRE, retirement. So probably not FIRE, but then, trying to work on my own enterprise and get things done, especially in the employability space. Yeah. So 5 years, that's the timeline. Let's see if it changes. Maybe someone's gonna bring a bigger back.
Yeah. I always say coding is almost like sports these days. The younger you are, the more valuable, right? I'm into Formula One these days, and it's interesting that there's a wide range of age groups that compete compared to other forms of sports.
Mm.
I think Fernando Alonso is like, I don't know, maybe 10 years older than me. And
The guy's old.
and then well, I'm old. So yeah, he must be. And then you have the new kids like Nando, I think that's his name. Could be 20 something.
Huh?
So the range of expertise or the range of like the age range competing at the highest level is insane. You can't say the same thing about football or I mean Thomas Partey is like probably 40 right now. I hope it's I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's 30. Maybe. I don't know.
It's probably gonna tell it's
I
20,
don't-
29, it's 27. It's like, no.
It's only 31. Anyway, it's not. Anyway, I think my point is that I think with coding, one thing you notice is, more companies hire younger people who have no family. They can drink Red Bull
The
all
crack
night.
death.
Yeah,
The
and
crack
that tends
deaths.
to yeah, and that tends to be more valuable. I think for me, it's always interesting to see, how do you transition into a role as an engineer where your experience is working for you versus against you? And I think that's the biggest challenge that some of us will start to have to answer, which is ironic because every other profession, if you're a medical doctor, if you're a lawyer, if you're into finance, I think the older you are, the more experienced you are, the more valuable you are to an organization. I think when you're an engineer or you're a coder, it seems almost the other way around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna ask for more
I
perspective, but yeah, that's interesting. Go ahead, Anthony.
but I have a couple of things I want you guys to react to. So hold that thought in there. Let me know when you can
Hold
see
up.
this.
Yeah, I can.
Fastest way to change your life is change what you do in the first and last hour of your day. I don't know, man. A lot of this motivational stuff is too simplified. I feel like somebody wakes up. I feel like somebody wakes up and they're going through that exact transformation, and then they generalize that and is like, oh, if you meet your spouse in this particular environment, and it's like, ah. So, but it usually fits, right? It usually fits a narrative, and I don't know, maybe there's a psychological term to it, but I feel like it's easy for us to like relate with a particular example in our own lives to a particular quotation that's generalized well enough to feel like it's universally true. So I don't know. I'll pass on that one.
So I think maybe changing what you do in the first. This guy is literally talking productivity, and I kind of understand him. Like typical productivity coaches will tell you, hey, when you wake up, you don't touch your phone, you can meditate, like push through the day as much as possible before you soak in some screen time, like have a good breakfast, blah blah blah. And the same productivity folks will tell you that at the end of the day, like put together a to-do list for tomorrow. And that's literally what I'm seeing this guy talk about with this tweet. And it's not really bad, right? Because psychologically, I think there's a study that talks about how when you have a to-do list the night before and then you sleep on that, what happens then is that it sort of connects very well with your subconscious. Like you basically have
Interesting.
your neurons connecting as you sleep, and you wake up the following day with much more purpose as against, not having a to-do list or anything. And then you go into, the day, anybody gives you something to work on and then you're just, chasing it. So there's a bit of science to it, just that it's not the only thing. You can actually prepare your to-do list in the first hour of work, right? In the first 30 minutes of work. And that's why I think most tech teams will not put stand up exactly at the beginning of the day, because they want you to settle in and then you can now do all your stand up stuff. So it boils down to the principles. Focus,
Yeah.
focus, focus. I think that's the element of this particular tweet.
I also think that generally, right, like it just depends on where you are in life. Because what will get you from 0 to 1 is not the same that will get you from 1 to maybe 100, right? And this maybe is for folks who are like in a really, tough spot and they're trying to like, get somewhere. So by doing these things, it just helps. But like generally, for most people, I think it's BS, man.
I mean, my daughter wakes me up first thing in the morning, so I have no choice. She comes up on the door.
Hey, that's a different flex though.
All right, let's go to the next one. Do you guys see this? The minimum in MVP is the minimum it takes you to get someone to open a wallet, not the minimum it takes for the product to work.
It's funny. This guy sounds like an
no.
indie hacker, especially seeing Danny behind. I mean, in the replies, I would think Jason is an indie hacker. But anyway, what he's saying is really true, and I think that's the indie hacker mantra. VCs have destroyed the game where the minimum is really about the product and experience. You figure out your monetization later, get people locked in, and then monetize. But then indie hackers have the anthem. Like you look at this guy, Levels.io.
Levels.io.
He recently built his flight simulator, and literally the guy is charging for that product. And he will tell you that charge from day one, because you don't have the luxury to burn VC money, especially if you're an indie hacker. It's more like it's based on the perspective. If you have cash to burn, minimum is really about the experience and then locking people in. And then later you can, convert them. But then if you're a pure indie hacker, you're bootstrapping maybe, and you don't have cash, like free cash to burn, then probably the minimum is more like what it takes to get someone to open their wallet. So like, there are two truths in there. It can't be just one-sided. It depends on which side of the table you are.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the kind of conventional wisdom, and I think there is definitely truth to it. But I actually feel like like the measurement of traction is, to me, the minimum. Like, what's the minimum that gets somebody using my product at some level of, frequency enough to say that this is a, active user of some kind, like a daily active user, a weekly active user. Because you could have people spend money, but they can spend it once. So I think traction is a very important thing if you're building a startup, and ensuring that you have a small set of fan base that gives you a level of consistent usage of your product. And I mean, I get the fact that, you also don't want to conflate that with spend, because you could have folks who are using your product consistently, and once you introduce price point, then they will disappear. I think ideally you want to have both. You want to have people who can open their wallet, but open their wallets while, finding your product useful. Because otherwise, then they will open their wallet on the minimum viable product, use it, no traction, abandon it, and then you have your first monthly spike, and then boom. And I've seen that before. So I think traction is very important. Once you hit traction, like, you're flying at that point. You're flying using altitude more than using burning your own rocket fuel, if you will. So yeah.
Right. Let's see what we have next. Yeah. So this, I would just read the bottom first and then the top. I think the bottom here is Patrick Collison, one of the founders of Stripe. And his advice for people in their 20s is that work at a place with higher standards. And then someone goes on to quote that and say, I maintain that a problem selection is the most important expression of taste during a paradigm shift. But two threads here. One is working at a place with higher standards. And the second, maybe for great career professionals, is deciding what problem to tackle. I think my general thoughts here is that, like, I've worked at different places in my career, and I've seen my appreciation of quality of work, right, increase just based on where I work. Right? Like when I came from into One Acre Fund, where I was working with Jeremiah, there was a certain appreciation. There was a certain quality bar. It was new to me, like it was different. But after doing that, when I moved somewhere else, I realized that that would not work for me, to get ahead here. So I had to like aspire
Take it
to
to
a
the next
different
level.
quality bar. But exactly. But the whole point here is that like quality of work or high standards is not easily teachable. Like it's one of the things that you have to see it being left out, or you have to be close to it to experience. It's also why like our parents would say you're an average of 5 of your friends, because generally the interest around your friends is what like you consult to. So I think it's incredibly important for folks who are in this journey to choose places to work where there's a certain perception of high standards, right? And then just to trust that once you get in there, you would also gradually like maintain those high standards.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree with that. I think the hardest part is to move yourself into a place of high standard, especially if you feel like you're in a place of comfortability. And, it can take a bit of a sacrifice. Sometimes you can even take a pay cut. You could take a cut into your own sort of time, right? Because a place of high standard would demand more time for you than you were used to before. I think it's worthwhile the sacrifice, because especially in your 20s, because after that things go kind of downhill from there, right? But it's certainly possible. But it's much easier when you kind of get used to those standards at an earlier age. Then it kind of informs your mid career, which is usually towards the peak of your career anyway. Then you can maintain those high standards at that most crucial time. And I certainly can see that for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty solid advice, to be honest. For young people, it comes down to that will to always want to do better. I tend to call it personal excellence, right? So it's even when you are in a place where the standards are not high, you should be able to recognize that. I mean, I pretty much recall when I wanted to transition into tech, one of the things that I had to really stay very conscious of was the network of people that I related with. So I had to now go on Twitter, follow people in the tech community, follow product people, like just put myself in that space where I was simulating that environment, even if I was not going to get it in a big pharma space. And it was very perfect for me, because then at any point in time, I was getting this external awareness. So although you may not get it in your immediate work environment, because I was in sales, right? I was not getting that in an immediate work environment, but then I had to simulate that outside the work environment. And it really boils down to people. I have to interact with people who have the best taste, people who have those high standards. You don't compromise on you. You actually push yourself out. So that's because the thing is, and I'm always fighting with people on this. Like we all know that there are cases where wherever you start from, the compensation is bad, the work culture is
Yeah.
toxic, and I keep saying your employer is temporary. Your skills, I even tweeted that tonight actually. Your skills are with you forever. So never compromise on that. And it comes down to even simulating these kind of environments, even if like your workplace is not giving you the opportunity, and then you move till you find that perfect fit. And I think that could bring that level of satisfaction.
Sir, let's see. I think two more, maybe.
Who had
Who
things?
is this?
Who's
Who's this?
that? Who's that? Who's that
Oh,
guy?
Yo, Jeremiah, say more, man.
no, I can't say more. I'm gonna pass this one. I'm gonna let you. I'm gonna let y'all dissect that one. I don't want any quotations.
So this Twitter user says your job is 80% managing your work and 20% managing your manager. No matter how good you think you are, ultimately how good your manager thinks you are is what will matter, unfortunately.
Yeah.
This Twitter user, whatever.
This Twitter user.
Yeah.
This Twitter user.
Yeah.
I'll say,
I mean,
Tony, I've been very privileged. Like, I've been very privileged. I've had amazing bosses since the beginning of my career. So unfortunately, I can't talk about, I mean, I've worked with people who were not pulling their weights, they were not as collaborative and all of that. But then when it comes to having a good manager, I've always had a supportive manager. And I thank God that in my 10 years of working, I've never, ever had to cry about having a terrible boss. And I'm hoping that it never happens because that thing is crazy. So I completely agree. If you have a good boss, I can talk from that side of things. If you have a good boss, then everything becomes really super for you. It's smooth, push you. You're able to transparently talk about issues that you're facing. You get the best of support, and that sort of fosters trust. And that actually also shapes how you also become a boss because then there's this bar that has been set for you, and at the least chance where you get to manage people, you actually are able to tap into your subconscious and use that. At least that's the influence that it's had on me because all the empathetic bosses that I've come across has transformed me into an empathetic manager. So when it comes to career goal stuff, like I'm always trying to find out like what's the why, and trying to get to the bottom of things and solving it. So I don't know if you had terrible bosses, but I'd love to hear the other side of the story. In the past, though, so it's safe to talk about it.
yeah. I mean, I'm even not sure it's a case of like good versus terrible, as it is a case of what do you think of me, right? Because I mean, when I started to work in very professional setting, I would just like put my head down and do my work, right? And then I found joy in that. I found joy in telling myself that hey, I don't do that politics stuff, But ultimately, you get to learn like the really hard way that somebody needs to know what you're doing, right? And that's first. I mean, somebody needs to know what you're doing. And the second thing is that their perception of how important or good what you're doing is like really matters. So how do you influence that, right? And then that's what it's like very counterintuitive, but you maybe have to, put an effort into oversharing, right? Hey, like I just got X to do Y for me, and that's good for the product or the project, and all of that type of stuff. And, at some point you probably just need to embrace it and just like go ahead and consciously do it.
Yeah. Politics is not bad.
All right.
So
Let's save him, man. Let's save him.
it's a book I'm reading.
All right. Maybe this is the last but one. This thing is somebody who's asking, how do you grow your confidence like over the years, right? And this is like some Twitter user writes really well, like he's a lawyer. But the thing he said, which I'll read here, is that focus on building competence. I learned everything I could and anything. Consciously deciding to let go of shame and focus on learning, constantly curious and hard work. Your confidence grows once you can genuinely respect yourself for pushing through challenges.
Facts.
I just get a haircut.
And that's what? What'd you say?
I said I just get a haircut and I'm good. You guys are working
Let's
hard, bro.
go.
You guys are working hard for your confidence, bro. It's not that deep. Like it is.
He's a natural.
That's what I see.
You just wear a suit?
Yes, that's it.
Yeah, Anthony just wears one of his corporate loafer shoes and Yes, fancy shirts.
Yeah.
Does he fold his sleeves? Anthony looks like someone who fold his sleeves. Typical consultant behavior.
Top button, to the T,
Yeah, he's got his top button collars. No, but I honestly feel like a lot isn't said enough about like just how you look, how you feel about how you look. Just it's so important, right? Like feeling good.
Mhm.
You show up, you internally feel right. It makes a difference, and if you don't, then obviously second guessing yourself. You're already sort of, I think, just your look and your attire. You don't have to dress fancy, obviously, but I think um, you're feeling good kind of just gives you 30%, and then everything else you can build on top of. And yeah, I think it's so important.
There's this guy called Deion Sanders. He's like an NFL guy, he's called Primetime, like really great, well-spoken guy. I think one thing he said is that if I dress good, I feel good. If I feel good, I play good. If I play good, I earn more money. So I think just around that point of like confidence is maybe anything you can do to have a higher perception of your ability.
There's a danger part to that though, which I'm gonna call out. So I want to call out the dangerous part of that, right? And that's you lot are very competent. Like you're very competent, right? And that brings a whole new level. It unlocks a whole new level of confidence. I think we've got into a phase where people talk a lot about personal branding and they leave this aspect out and then they overly bias. So I like the fact that they overly bias for um the outward appearance, how you're gonna look, the perception, etc. But then you engage beyond that, public layer, and then you realize that this is not it, right? So it's really like you said, 30% that, and then 70% substance. So you don't go like, you know what, I just have to be competent. So I don't need to look good. I don't need to look presentable and all of that. That becomes, a disaster. But I want to call out the bit about the personal branding experts who focus a lot more on just about how you appear, and then they don't talk about the internal bits, the substance you're made of. Because at the end of the day, that's like where the brand comes from, right? Irrespective of all the stuff that's going to come out, on LinkedIn, all that stuff. At the end of the day, it comes down to how well are you confident within yourself that even what you're sharing is okay to share. You're okay to share a failure. You're okay to share a win. You're okay to share a normal day, that kind of thing. And a lot of people have to, be very conscious of that because personal branding these days is not it. It's just the outward. It's like 100% outward appearance. I hate that thing so much. I hate it so much.
You end up becoming like a scammer, right? Like if you're just like 100% on the outward experience, I mean, even if you're an artist, I think one thing is for sure is that you need to have a body of work, and that body of work kind of gives you that confidence or that swagger to kind of like prove that you've done something. And it's usually maybe if you're an upcoming artist, you probably have a mixtape, you probably have like a underground record that is successful in whatever way you want to measure success, and then that kind of like boosts you for like your debut album. And if you're like a seasoned artist, then you have like 3, 4, 5 albums that are like have done well in some sort of critical.